Hello and welcome to the final series of Arvada Centennial. I'm Charlie Alt, owner of the Festival Playhouse. A true community takes more than just people and land and roads to connect it together. It's also the goals and events and traditions that people share that unite them. As we continue to look at Arvada's history during the centennial year of its incorporation, we would like to reflect on groups and gatherings and customs that have made Arvada a true community. We'd like to take a look first at our tradition of education.
Arvada's educational heritage has always inspired pride and excellence. Our flagship schools, founded in the early 20th century, were models of distinction that our community has continued to build on. But our town's educational heritage began even before Arvada was founded or incorporated, and owes much to our earliest pioneer families. It was 1862, and only a handful of families had settled in the land that would become Arvada. But almost as quickly as they put up their first crude dwelling places, they built schools. And they were among the first in the Colorado Territory to do so.
Colorado Territory was established February 28, 1861. Golden opened the first public school in September of 1862. And a few months later, in November of 1862, the Wolfs established a log cabin school on their property.
The homestead of John B. Wolfe rested near Clear Creek, between present-day streets of Wadsworth Boulevard and Allison, not far from I-70. The Wolfs raised their 7 children here for many years, but sadly, the Wolf Schoolhouse burned down in 1864, only 2 years after it was built.
They had a New Year's Eve watch party in the school, and that probably involved lighting candles and maybe watching them burn down as the old year went away and the new year came in. At least the building caught on fire and the school was burned.
Another school built that same year was Grant School, believed to be pictured in this photograph, and once located not far from present-day Fremont Elementary. But it was considered to be outside of Arvada's school area back then, and it was also doomed to an early demise.
Grant School was out in the country, and it was an adobe school. And very little, is known about this school. But Grant School melted in a spring snowstorm. And after that, Fremont Elementary School was built, and it was named for Jessie Benton Freeman, the wife of the Pathfinder.
But within the boundaries that would first become known as Arvada, the tradition of education owes much to town founder Benjamin Wadsworth. Lessons began in Arvada's first frame schoolhouse after Wadsworth donated land for it in 1867. It was known as the Arvada School of District No. 2. In 1882, a fine brick schoolhouse replaced the frame one. Here the Swadley children, the Renos, Graves, Yocums, and others gathered for winter lessons, their bodies warmed by the potbelly stove, and their minds tuned into the lessons of the McGuffey Reader.
They would have completed all the books in the McGuffey Reader series. They would have learned many poems by heart because this was part of what the program consisted of in those days.
There was recess too, of course, and children were said to enjoy school. It was, after all, a way of escaping the toil of the family farm for a short time. Even so, farm chores before and after school were common for most kids, and the schoolhouse itself was far from luxurious, with no toilets or running water.
I like to think that the Wadsworth School, both the frame school and the brick school on Wadsworth, were something like my first school. In 1942, I was hired to teach in a one-room school, frame school, that was up in the mountains west of Trinidad, Colorado. Now, they didn't have any water in the school, of course, and so Wayne, my student, and I would have to stop at the spring and pick up a bucket of water each day as we came up to the school.
Class sizes were small in Arvada's first schools of the 19th century, with all grades mixed in one room. The school teacher was paid about $40 a month back then. The Arvada School on Wadsworth continued to serve the community until 1920, when its blackboards were replaced by the silver screen, and it was transformed into the town movie hall, delighting children and families with Hollywood's latest productions. Renovations to the building in recent years restored its original look in front. The old lintel stone, found in a basement by Arvada Historical Society members years ago, again graces the front entry. Elementary grades were primarily taught at school, and an 8th grade graduation was considered pretty good back then. But many wanted more, and as the school population increased, the foundations for a bigger school and for Arvada's first high school took shape. It was 1900, still before incorporation, when the new school was built in Arvada. Known as Arvada High School, its students still included primary grades, and the school would later be named Lawrence Elementary in honor of Helen Lawrence, who taught there for 27 years.
It was a wonderful school. It was one of the grandest buildings in town. Towering brick edifice, very Victorian looking. Everyone was very proud of their Arvada High School.
Arvada High School boasted 7 students in 1900. Only one would go on to become the first graduate in 1904, the year of Arvada's incorporation. She was a young woman named Angie Bates, and her graduation is commemorated at Arvada High School's museum today.
We have Angie Bates. We're very proud. She's the first graduate, 1904. She made her dress, she made her invitation, and it was interesting that it was a girl that made it all the way through the Arvada school system and graduated the first graduate.
In 1920, a high school was built, a big, important high school. It was on land that had been purchased from the Seacrest family, from Luther Seacrest, and it was built to be a place of instruction for high school students only. And it was there that Arvada's proud tradition of high school students truly began.
And it's interesting, all the way up through the 20s, most of the star athletic teams are women. They were girls because most of the time the boys were on the farm working.
If they weren't on the farm working, it's likely they at least encountered agriculture classes at the high school. But the guys weren't to be left out of the sports arena for long. Much of the school's ensuing sports tradition is credited to a particular man and era.
Tom Vanderhoof comes into the school and sets a lot of the colors, the names, and puts forth together the first football team. So the football era of Arvada High School began in the 1920s, and you begin to see some of the trophies, the cups.
In this centennial year of Arvada's incorporation, Arvada High School also celebrates its 100th year of graduating classes. But the school's museum proudly represents much of what education has meant to Arvada as a whole.
It brings a place in town for Old Town Arvada. And Arvada being the first school, I think it brings that 100 years sort of out in the open. And many people are surprised by what's in the case. People come into this room and they're in awe.
It's a reflection of many glorious decades of education in Arvada. And though Arvada High School remained our community's only public high school for 6 decades, our town's proud heritage of education now continues with students at Arvada West, Pomona, Ralston Valley, and Stanley Lake, as well as many fine middle schools and countless elementary schools too. Left behind are the days of the one-room schoolhouse, but the dedication to high educational standards instilled by Arvada's early settlers continues in Arvada today.
If you've ever been to the Harvest Festival, you're part of Arvada's oldest and longest running traditions. In fact, many social gatherings and customs were founded by our pioneer heritage. Church socials, athletic groups, and festivals all make us feel like we're part of our community. And we have our pioneer families to thank for that foundation.
They came from many places: New York, Ohio, Virginia, Missouri, Pennsylvania. Although Arvada's town founders had little with which to begin their new lives, they brought something priceless with them: a spirit of community and a blend of traditions. Such gatherings were important to building their sense of community, just as they are for us today. In the days before incorporation, Arvada's founders made sure that being out here in the Wild West, a relatively unsettled area compared to back east, wasn't all drudgery and hard work. Settlers made time for community, for family and friends, and sharing good times. A Sunday afternoon in a flower-laden field with friends, a picnic, and a sense of humor might have been the way of Reno clan members. While the Wadsworths or Swadleys probably gathered at church socials to mingle with their friends. There was lots of work, of course, but it was sometimes mixed with social gatherings. Threshing season and barn raisings easily turned into occasions for great feasts or dances.
When a new barn was built, people very often had a party, a barn party, where they danced and got all the bumps out of the floor and by their swiftly flying feet. And these were the kinds of activities. They were self-made activities.
Other social get-togethers centered around religion, and families of many faiths settled here before incorporation. At first, they gathered at various homes and business buildings. But as the turn of the century approached, fine structures from many of the religious groups went up around town. In the coming decades, members of the various churches even found time to share with each other.
The Methodists would go to the Presbyterians, and the Presbyterians would go to the Methodists, and they all came and ate at St. Anne's spaghetti suppers. Everybody in town came to St. Anne's spaghetti suppers. People traveled from outside Arvada to come to the Shrine of St. Anne for the spaghetti dinners. And everybody in the church got involved in the act. All the young people checked coats and did whatever they could to ease the way, and all the women cooked the spaghetti. No men at all were allowed in the kitchen, period. And then the men, though, were assigned to cleanup duty.
Food, always a great excuse for a celebration, played a role in our earliest festivals too. Hard as it is to imagine, strawberry fields were once plentiful enough to give Arvadans a reason to celebrate, and they did, along with visitors from surrounding areas. Newspaper accounts of the first Strawberry Festival on June 17, 1911, claim that thousands turned out. The event would evolve into the Arvada Harvest Festival and become an annual fall event in 1925. Early festivals featured displays of prize-winning flowers and canned goods. Festive floats decorated with the pride of community groups and delighted crowds packed the street for a parade. Teachers joined the procession in style. It seemed the whole town was involved. It was a true community event. Still celebrated today, the annual Harvest Festival reflects the threads of pride that tie our town together. Community baseball teams gave early Arvadans something else to cheer about. The Ralston baseball team was formed as early as 1892 and played teams like Golden and the School of Mines. But there were other Arvada teams too.
And I think my dad was on a ball team one time. I think that was a real important thing in those days. They had baseball teams.
And the Arvada band struck a popular note with lots of citizens. It was formed by J.C. Munel, who also owned the shoe repair shop in Old Town. Munel was the band director from about 1915 until at least 1926 when this photo was taken. Old-time Arvadans sometimes recount childhood stories of going down to McElvoy Park to hear the Arvada band play. McElvoy Park was a popular gathering place for many get-togethers, and it was Arvada's first public park. The land for it, along with the McElvoy House, was donated to the city in 1919 by Clemency McElvoy after her husband died. The couple had no children of their own, but young Arvada kids loved them and called Clemency Auntie Mac. She was a colorful character. It's said she liked to smoke cigars, but shunned liquor. In fact, she dictated that no alcohol shall be served or sold in McElvoy Park. Other Arvadans shared her values. The International Order of Good Templars, a society opposed to liquor, was active in Arvada as early as 1871. Picnics and ice cream socials were often the good cheer that brought this group together, both before and after Arvada's incorporation. By the mid-1950s, around the time of Arvada's 50th anniversary of incorporation, community pride seemed to be at an all-time high. Arvada's social leaders led the way with litterbug parades that decked the streets with bands and baton twirlers and sparkling new cars. It was picture-perfect small-town America, where everyone knew everyone and got together often. Oddly enough, it was a tree that had united a popular group of this period many years before. The Arvada Garden Club took root in 1937 after the legendary hackberry tree was chopped down by vandals in the middle of the night. The story goes that the crooked-trunked hackberry had stood at the top of the hill near 70th Drive in Wadsworth for 100 years, a beacon to many who settled here. Because Arvadans loved it so much, the hackberry was to be moved rather than destroyed when progress dictated that Wadsworth Boulevard should take its place in 1937. But there was reportedly so much fuss over moving the beloved tree that a disgruntled street worker settled the dispute by cutting it down with an unknown partner in crime. Enraged by the foul deed, Arvadan Ora Keene, a passionate gardener, expressed the outrage of the entire town by writing a poem that's said to have founded the Arvada Garden Club.
It says, "Today our old friend who guarded the hill, felled by a vandal, lies vanquished and still. Struck in the dark he now lies in the dust, killed by a coward with cold, cruel lust. Old sire of the country, this hackberry tree has guarded his secret from you and from me. Near 100 years he watched that crest, seems he should have had a bit of the best. This hoary old fellow, the last of his kind, a landmark that never again will we find. We grieve at his passing, saddened are we. Your neighbors will miss you, old hackberry tree."
Perhaps Ora Keene had captured the symbolic importance of the tree in a community that valued every member of this close-knit town. For many decades that followed, Keene and others of the Arvada Garden Club spruced up the streets around town, planting bulbs here and there, instilling more pride in the community. It entered state flower shows and took home prized awards for Arvada. But mostly it got involved and continued Arvada's strong tradition of a united community. Though the Arvada Garden Club is no longer active today, its members connected our town in their own unique way. Other groups continue the tradition today, forming the bonds of a strong community that remains one of Arvada's greatest qualities, just as it was 100 years ago.
The Arvada that we know and love today still finds its greatest strength from the strong community ties that it made 100 years ago. While other towns have lost their identity due to rapid growth and the changes of the 20th century, Arvada has been able to hold on to its unique hometown heritage. We would now like to take a look at Arvada in the 20th century.
In the years following Arvada's incorporation, our town championed its title as celery capital of the world and boasted of its vast wheat fields. But it would not remain a sleepy agricultural community much longer. It would, however, continue to build on the roots that its farming pioneers and gold-seeking adventurers had put down. Good schools, community pride, a sense of belonging, and in the decades of the 100 years following incorporation, milestones took their place in Arvada's history, while community pride continued to swell. In the 1920s, a proud volunteer fire department served the community and got its first motorized fire truck, which was summoned in emergencies by an alarm at the back of City Hall. Town leaders clamped down on speeders, for after all, the town's burgeoning population of 1,200 was enjoying the mobility of the automobile and had to be reminded not to go faster than 25 miles an hour around town. In the 30s, even through the Depression, Arvadans proved their mettle, continuing to thrive and add elements to their caring community. The Wilmore Richter American Legion Post donated the first community ambulance to the town, and 60 citizens took first aid classes and helped the driver in emergencies. Community pride was personified in the renowned beautiful gardens of a couple believed to be the only black family in the area at the time. Mr. and Mrs. Charles Britton received many national awards for their beautiful flower gardens at their home in East Arvada. Newspapers carried stories of their midsummer flower show benefiting a nearby church. 250 people attended the event, enjoying refreshments and musical entertainment. Echoes of the gardens still speak of the home's grace and beauty today. The 40s arrived, and Arvadans did their part for the war effort by raising money through war bonds, and young men left to serve our nation. As the boys from World War II returned home, married their sweethearts, and began their families of their own, Arvada, like so many communities, began to see bigger changes. Incorporated Arvada would soon be 50 years old and preparing to leave its agricultural heritage to the history books. Hot rods and hamburger stands mark memories of happy days of the 1950s. Arvadans also joined the atomic age as the Atomic Energy Commission announced in 1951 that it would build a production plant to make atomic bomb triggers at the Rocky Flats northwest of town. The plant became controversial as the decades rolled on, until finally it was phased out and marked for shutdown. But in its heyday, it fostered economic growth and created jobs for Arvadans. Arvadans, by the way, did their part for the nation's baby boom, growing from a population of 2,359 in 1950 to 7,000 in 1955. All that new growth required new homes, and subdivisions began to replace the wheat and celery fields. Chester Hoskinson's Vetting subdivision in southeast Arvada was one of the first of the town's housing booms. The Kimbrough area, where the Kimbrough home stands today at Carr and Grandview, soon followed along with others. Homes were selling for $7,000 to $12,000. All those new homeowners had to cope with something that we all have been accustomed to: a drought and curtailed lawn watering privileges. In 1960, the security of Arvada's water supply got a boost when Mayor Gail Gilbert signed a contract with the Denver Water Board to buy water under the Moffett Tunnel water contract. Growing families required more schools. Plans for a new City Hall building got underway. There were more and more paved roads, more stoplights, more stop signs, and more people on the go. The new interstate link, I-70, made its way to Arvada's back door, and the freedom of highways gave Arvadans yet another reason to join together in celebration. Though the 1960s were a time of progress, Arvada, like many of the rest of the nation, was touched by national tragedies in the Vietnam War. As the Arvada community continued to grow in the 1970s, it recorded more milestones, added new landmarks. The city's new town hall finally opened on Ralston Road after a controversy about where to locate it. It continues to serve Arvada today. A brand new post office also joined the landscape in 1972, and our heritage of a beautiful park and trail system was well on its way to fame when Arvadans voted to build 32 new parks with a $3.4 million bond issue. By far the crowning achievement of Arvada in the 1970s was its crown jewel, the Arvada Center. Groundbreaking ceremonies in March of 1975 soon followed with the dedication of a new building on the nation's bicentennial date, July 4th, 1976. Few at that special ceremony might have guessed how the Arvada Center's reputation for excellence would grow over the years. Now known as the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, it is a nationally recognized icon for superior performances, classes, and exhibits. Yet as Arvada has grown with the rest of the metro area through the 1980s and 90s and on into the new millennium, it's kept its own identity and its own community bonds intact through its schools, its civic organizations, and its cherished festivals. As our community of more than 100,000 celebrates the first 100 years of Arvada's incorporation, young generations of Arvada today can look to the next century with pride and confidence, knowing the foundation of our community rests on solid values and dedication of the founders who shared a vision for a great community.
I hope that you have enjoyed our look at Arvada's history during its 100 years of incorporation. As the history shows and as you look around our town, I think that you can feel proud to be a part of this community. I'm Charlie Alt. Thanks for watching.